Hello family. Welcome to Morales Stories, your home for gripping African tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Now sit back and enjoy the drama. Adanna stood in the center of her tastefully decorated dining room, untouched plates arrayed on the table like silent sentinels. The red silk dress she wore shimmered under the warm glow of the chandelier, a dress Boma had once called my heart's favorite. For weeks she'd planned this evening: candles, jasmine-scented incense, his favorite cassava fufu and egusi soup, even the West African highlife playlist he adored. She'd practiced her smile, imagined his surprise, rehearsed her laughter. At precisely 7, the front door clicked. Her heart fluttered. She heard Boma's deep voice greeting his friends, her friends, then the soft thud of his briefcase on the floor. She rose, smoothing the folds of her dress. She opened her mouth to call his name. He entered the room with a swagger, followed by 3 of his colleagues. Their jackets draped over the coat rack. Boma's eyes roamed the table, then flicked to her. He froze mid-stride. His gaze traveled up her body, hovered on the scarlet fabric, and she watched his smile drop like a stone. "You're still wearing that," he sneered, his tone low enough for only her to hear. He cleared his throat and addressed his friends in a booming voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Adanna." In vintage nightmare red. Laughter erupted. One of his friends, Chitty, covered his mouth, eyes watering. Another, Emeka, tried to stifle a snort behind his hand. Ifeanyi looked away, embarrassed. Adanna's forced smile trembled. She opened her lips. "Boma, I." He cut her off. "Outdated. Embarrassing. Reminds me of that country wedding years ago." He glanced at his friends, proud of the punch. "Honestly, you looked better in that supermarket gown you wore last week." Adanna's cheeks burned. The hot flicker of shame danced across her skin. Behind her, the jasmine incense burned low, the candles strained to stay alight. A bead of sweat trickled down her neck. Boma dropped onto the nearest chair. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, gaze trained on his phone. "Well, aren't you going to serve? Or do you want your guests to starve?" Her hand fluttered toward the casserole dish. She took a trembling step, placed a plate before each guest, her movements mechanical. She spoke softly, "I made your favorite dishes." Boma flicked his gaze up. "I'm not your favorite audience." He tapped his phone again. Adanna sank to her seat. She picked at the greens. Her appetite dissolved. He ate nothing. He texted. He laughed at something on his screen. His friends exchanged awkward glances. Some avoided looking at her, others kept stealing furtive glances at their phones. The room felt cold, despite the candles. When the meal ended in strained silence, Boma stood and swept the candles off the table with a single motion, extinguishing them. The room flickered into shadows. Adanna gasped. He pointed to the door. "Enough. I've carried you for too long, Adanna. Actually, I carried us, my salary, my ambition, my name. You're dead weight." Her mouth went dry. She opened it. "What?" He cut her off again. "Pack. All your things. I don't want you here when I get back." He turned on his heel. "Don't follow." Silence. Adanna stared at the spot where he'd stood. His footsteps retreated down the hallway. The final click of their bedroom door echoed through the house. Her world lurching, Adanna gathered her purse, her phone. She called her sister, Obiageli, but it went to voicemail. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She shoved a few clothes into a suitcase, her hands shaking. Photographs tumbled out, wedding day smiles, birthday cakes, they scattered. She paused to cradle a photo of them on the beach, laughing. Tears blurred her vision. Dawn's first light crept through the curtains. Adanna stood on their porch, suitcase at her feet, eyes red and swollen. She closed the door behind her, the lock's click final. In the street, the air smelled of damp earth and roasting plantains from a nearby vendor. She perched on the top stair, suitcase by her side. For a heartbeat, she considered going back, confronting him, begging forgiveness. Instead, she slid down and wrapped her arms around her knees. Her tears fell in slow arcs. Rain clouds gathered overhead, and the first drops fell. She huddled under the porch roof, rain splattering the cement in dark beads. From the edge of her vision, she saw movement. Mr. Kalu, their elderly neighbor, approaching. His gait was slow but sure. His gray beard bristled in the wind. He carried a folded umbrella. He stopped a yard away. "Adanna." His voice was gentle as a lullaby. "You look cold." She blinked through tears. "I." He stepped closer, extending the umbrella with one gnarled hand. "Here. You don't deserve this." She stared at him. Why him? She barely knew him. He was private, always had been. A widower. A retired photographer, she'd heard, from royalty portrait shoots to gallery exhibitions abroad. He rarely spoke to anyone. But now he stood before her, concern etched around his slanted eyes. "Please," he repeated. "Come inside. At least until the rain passes." She looked at her soaked slippers, at her suitcase, then back at him. "Thank you," she whispered. He pivoted on his heel and led her up the neighboring porch steps into his modest home. Inside, the walls were adorned with old photographs, black and white portraits of kings and queens, fierce warriors, radiant children. The air smelled of cedar wood and darkroom chemicals. Mr. Kalu set the umbrella aside and offered her a thick blanket. She wrapped it around her shoulders. He disappeared into another room, returning with a steaming mug of hot ginger tea and a plate of akara balls. "Eat," he said kindly. "Warm your body." She took a ball, bit into the crisp exterior, tasted the soft, savory center. The warmth spread through her, a balm to her frayed nerves. He sat opposite her. Silence stretched comfortably. Finally, he spoke. "You're safe here." He tapped his chest. "I heard everything. No one deserves that." Her vision blurred. She nodded, unable to speak. He pointed to the photographs. "I was a photographer for 30 years. I learned to see more than what's visible. I see storms in people's hearts." He studied her face. "But I also see strength." She looked down at her hands in her lap. They trembled. She swallowed, found her voice. "Thank you." Mr. Kalu smiled. "Call me Kalu. No need for Mr." She managed a small smile. In that moment, drenched by rain and drenched by heartbreak, Adanna felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, hope. She sat quietly, cradling the mug as steam curled around her fingers. Every heartbeat thundered, reminding her of what she'd lost, and what might lie ahead. The tears from earlier settled deep inside, mingling with a fragile sense of possibility. Outside, rain pattered on the roof, a steady rhythm that seemed to say, "Endure, and you will grow." She thought of the red dress abandoned in the suitcase at her feet. Once a symbol of love, now a shroud of shame. In this quiet room filled with framed stories, she sensed she could lay down that burden and begin again. The spicy aroma of tea warmed her chest. Beyond these walls, her old life unraveled completely. That terrified her. Yet, for the first time, she realized she was not alone. Kalu sat across with kindness in his eyes, a stranger who saw her worth before she could. When the rain eased into drizzle, Adanna set her mug aside and stood, joint stiff but spirit awakened. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, knowing tomorrow she would face the world anew, not as the woman her husband belittled, but as someone reborn through heartbreak and unexpected grace. And tonight, she dared to dream of new beginnings, guided by a stranger's gentle hand and promise. The rain had finally relented by the next morning, leaving the dusty streets slick with mud and puddles reflecting the pale dawn light. Adanna awoke on the floral-patterned sofa in Kalu's cozy sitting room, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. The walls were lined with photographs in ornate frames, a stern-faced king in traditional regalia, a young queen smiling in ceremonial robes, villagers gathered for festival dances. A battered wooden coffee table held an assortment of tea tins and a leather-bound journal. Her mind still reeled from last night's heartbreak, but the gentle hum of a distant rooster reminded her the world went on. Soft footsteps approached, and the front door opened. Kalu stepped in carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs. He placed one in her hand. "Ginger tea," he said gently. "For the nerves." The steam curled around his fingers, and in the pale morning glow his weathered face seemed illuminated by kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hoarse. He sat in his favorite armchair, its cushions worn from years of use, porcelain mug balanced on an armrest. Did you sleep at all? She wrapped the blanket tighter and glanced at the wooden stairwell leading to the small guest room. Some, she admitted. But the nightmares followed the rain. I kept hearing Boma's words. Kalu's gaze turned downward. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry you had to endure that. Adanna shook her head. No one could have stopped him. She took a cautious sip of tea. Warmth spread through her chest, chasing away tremors. This place, it's beautiful. He smiled, eyes misting slightly. My wife named it Azure House, long before I did. She loved shades of blue, sky at dawn, ocean at dusk. His voice cracked. She died 10 years ago, not long after our daughter was born. I stayed here alone, trying to photograph memories. Adanna's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. He waved away her concern. Don't pity me. We all carry storms inside. My camera helped me see them and set them down on paper. Adanna's gaze roamed the room. The photographs felt alive, textures of fabrics, the glint of jewelry, the faintest flicker of emotion captured at the perfect moment. Your work, it's incredible. He leaned forward. Show me what you remember. He nodded toward the antique camera resting on the coffee table, its leather strap cracked with age. Her pulse quickened. She reached for the camera, heart pounding. Kalu handed her a fresh roll of film. This one's yours. She inhaled, steadied her breath, lifted the camera, and peered through the viewfinder. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floorboards. She focused on Kalu's lined face, every crease, every story, and pressed the shutter. The click sounded like possibility. Nice, Kalu said, and beckoned her to move. Try something else. She moved slowly, photographing the delicate lace curtains fluttering in the breeze, the ceramic vases on the mantelpiece, and the empty chair by the window, still holding the echo of someone who once sat there. With each shot, she felt an unexpected thrill. The camera was no longer foreign, it felt like an extension of her own sight. After several rolls, Kalu led her down a narrow hallway to a converted garage. The door opened to reveal a darkroom, racks for drying prints, tall cabinets of chemicals, a single red bulb glowing softly. He guided her through the process, developing her images in trays of developer and fixer. They watched as photos materialized, Kalu's portrait, the lace curtains in ghostly detail, and the battered umbrella she still carried. Adanna gasped as the images emerged, each frame a fragment of her healing. Over the next few days, Adanna immersed herself in Kalu's world. Before dawn, they ventured into the village. He taught her to read natural light, the way morning rays glowed on banana leaves, how midday sun bleached colors, and how twilight turned faces into silhouettes. She captured an old woman stirring fufu over an open fire, the smoke curling around her weathered face, children kicking a makeshift football in a red dirt field, a nurse examining patients under the shade of a mango tree. At each click, the weight in her chest lifted a fraction. One afternoon, they paused outside the clay hut of Master Obi, the village potter whose hands shaped earth into art. Obi, gray-haired and stooped, welcomed them with a nod. Kalu whispered, "Your turn." Adanna crouched beside Obi, lifted her camera, and clicked at the precise moment when the wheel spun, catching clay mid-twirl. The potter's hands, caked with mud, moved with both strength and grace. She lowered the camera, breath caught. Obi looked at her with a twinkle. "You have an eye." "That's thanks to my teacher," she said softly. Kalu smiled from the shade of a nearby tree. "She's beginning to see." That evening, back in the darkroom, Adanna developed the day's work. Villagers' faces appeared, their eyes bright, lines softened by gentle smiles. She held a print of the potter's hands and felt a thrill of accomplishment. "Her lens," Kalu said, reading her thoughts. He leaned against a shelf. "That's your page's name." Adanna frowned. "Why that name?" "Because your camera reveals hidden truths. You see souls, not just subjects." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She frowned. Weeks ago, she had forgotten it existed. She dug it out and stared at the screen. Notifications stacked like puzzle pieces. Followers praising her anonymous uploads, comments from art blogs requesting features, and an email from a local gallery asking for permission to display her prints. She blinked. I didn't expect this." Kalu peered over her shoulder. You posted the Potter's Hands picture last night, didn't you? She nodded, cheeks flushing. It felt right. I needed to share it. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Honesty resonates. Over the next week, her lens page blossomed. Hundreds of followers turned into thousands. Comments flooded in. Your work heals. You elevate the ordinary. Please show your face. At first she hesitated, but Kalu encouraged her to share a simple message. I am Adanna, and these are our stories. The response grew even more fervent. Back in the village, prints appeared on bulletin boards and in local shops. Council elders approached Kalu. Sir, may we display these at the community center? They asked respectfully. At the opening ceremony, Adanna wore a simple white blouse and jeans. Framed prints lined the mud-plastered walls. The scent of white lilies filled the air. A council member spoke into a microphone. Today we honor one of our own, a woman who captures our spirits with compassion and grace. Adanna's heart raced. She stepped forward, palms sweaty. She raised her voice. Thank you for welcoming my work. Through these images, I hope you see your own strength and beauty. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears blurred her vision. From the back, Kalu nodded, eyes shining. That night, after a dinner of yam porridge and soft conversation, Adanna checked her phone under the glow of a bedside lamp. Her inbox overflowed with interview requests, invitations to city exhibitions, and messages from strangers who felt seen by her lens. She felt both exhilaration and fear. Before sleep claimed her, she sat on the edge of the guest bed, phone in hand. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting silver bars across the room. The storms inside her had brought her here, to a gentle mentor, to discovery, to a community uplifted by her vision. Just before drifting off, her phone pinged with one new email, an invitation from a prominent city gallery offering a solo show. Her breath caught in her throat. Tomorrow, she thought, tomorrow destiny waits just beyond her door. She smiled through tears at the possibilities ahead, truly grateful. The city gallery invitation sat in her inbox like a live wire. Every time Adanna glanced at it, her breath would hitch, palms dampening. A solo exhibition. In Lagos. It felt surreal, something meant for people with fine art degrees, with glossy portfolios and confidence that dripped off their every move. Not for someone like her. Not for a woman who, just a few weeks ago, had stood in the rain with her suitcase and a shattered marriage. Yet, here she was, in Azure House with Kalu sipping lemon tea, sunlight streaking through the blinds, while her phone buzzed like a hive with messages of praise, curiosity, and opportunity. Why haven't you responded? Kalu asked, seated across the table with his spectacles halfway down his nose. He was sorting through old negatives, his hands steady even after decades of work. They gave you a deadline. I don't know, Adanna replied, eyes lowered. What if I'm not ready? You were ready the moment you picked up that camera, he said simply. Adanna stared at her hands, small, shaking slightly. I feel like an imposter. These people, they call me an artist, a healer, a visionary. I was just surviving, taking pictures to escape myself. That's where real art comes from, he replied. From truth. Pain gives birth to clarity, and clarity creates vision. You didn't just take pictures, Adanna. You captured souls. She looked up, his words landing heavy. In Kalu's lined face she saw no flattery, only belief. That afternoon, they took a walk to the village outskirts. Kalu handed her a new camera, modern this time, gifted to her by one of the local newspapers that had done a feature on her lens. Time to level up, he smiled. Let's see what the new girl can do. Adanna beamed. She adjusted the strap, tested the weight in her hands, and lifted it to her eye. Through the lens, she saw the world differently now. Every wrinkle told a story, every smirk carried history. She snapped a photo of a woman balancing firewood on her head, her child asleep on her back, face serene. Then she caught a moment between two teenagers under a mango tree, hands brushing, eyes locking, the innocent tremble of first love. Click. Another story sealed forever. The days that followed became a rhythm of light and shadow. Adanna would wake at dawn, spend her mornings in the field, afternoons editing in the makeshift studio, and evenings curled up in the sitting room reviewing her gallery submission materials. The buzz around her lens only intensified. Art pages began using her images for their profile headers. A Ghanaian actress reposted one of her photos, captioning it, "Every image from this woman heals me." Kalu watched her with quiet satisfaction. "It's time you stop hiding behind the lens," he told her one evening. "Let the world see who her lens truly is." She frowned. "But it's never been about me." "That's exactly why it's powerful," he said. "You give people their stories back. But now, it's time you own yours too." She opened her laptop that night, stared at the gallery email, and after a long pause, typed, "Dear Curator Daramola, thank you for the honor. I am grateful to accept the invitation to showcase her lens at your gallery. I look forward to sharing these stories with the world. Sincerely, Adanna Okere." She hit send before she could overthink. 2 weeks later, preparations for the exhibition were in full swing. The gallery team in Lagos arranged transportation for Adanna and Kalu. They insisted on printing her photographs on large canvases and showcasing them under curated light settings. The night before their departure, the village held a small send-off in the town square. Elder Mama Ijeoma blessed her, anointing her forehead with palm oil and whispering, "Let your light remain pure." The children she once photographed danced barefoot, their joy contagious. Adanna laughed through tears, overwhelmed. "Where would I be without you?" she whispered to Kalu as they sat watching the festivities. "Probably still stuck next to that cruel man, wearing that red dress," he teased, and she chuckled. The drive to Lagos the next morning was quiet. Adanna stared out the window, camera in her lap. Every mile felt like a step further into a new life. As the skyline of Lagos approached, its towering buildings, its impatient traffic, its pulse, her chest tightened. The gallery itself was a tall white structure nestled in the heart of Victoria Island. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint, polished wood, and citrus cleaners. The director, Mrs. Daramola, greeted her with an embrace. "You are exactly as I imagined," she said. "Graceful. Eyes like someone who's seen both storms and stars." Adanna blushed. The gallery walls soon filled with her work. Each piece was mounted with care, the potter's hands, children of rain, smiles beneath smoke, and more. Under each image, a simple caption. Photographed by her lens, Adanna Okere. The opening night arrived like a storm of nerves. Adanna dressed in a cream-colored dress, her hair pulled into a simple puff, gold studs glinting under the lights. Kalu, in his navy agbada, walked beside her like a proud father. Guests filled the gallery, bloggers, celebrities, diplomats, everyday people who'd followed her journey online. A journalist from BBC Africa asked for a short interview. Adanna nodded, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger as she answered. "I didn't think I had a voice," she said, eyes moist. "But through this lens, I found it. These images are not just art, they're proof that pain can be turned into purpose." Applause rippled through the room. Then came the unexpected, a voice that froze the back of her spine. "Adanna!" She turned. Boma stood a few feet away, dressed sharply in a black blazer, his face wearing an awkward half-smile. His eyes searched hers for something familiar. She saw none. "You look wow," he said, stepping closer. "I always knew you had this in you. I'm proud of you." She looked at him in silence, heart steady. I've been thinking a lot lately," he continued. "Maybe we both made mistakes. Maybe." She cut in, voice firm and public. "You threw me out like trash. And now you want to recycle me because I'm valuable." Gasps filled the room. Phones clicked. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Boma's smile faltered. "Adanna, let's not make a scene." "I didn't make a scene. You did. On our anniversary. Remember that." Her voice trembled with strength. "This gallery isn't just a celebration. It's a graveyard too, for the woman you buried. And trust me, I've risen." With that, she turned her back to him and walked across the room toward Kalu, who was standing by a large canvas titled, "Still Standing." The crowd erupted into applause. Boma disappeared into the night, out of focus. As Adanna stood there, breathing in the weight and freedom of her decision, Kalu leaned in and said softly, "You've just captured your best image yet." She smiled, eyes glistening. "And this time, I'm the subject." And indeed, for the first time, she felt truly seen, not by a man, not by a camera, but by herself. By the following morning, Adanna's name was trending. The confrontation at the gallery had gone viral overnight. A short clip of her standing firm, eyes blazing as she dismissed Boma's pathetic attempt at reconciliation, was everywhere, from Instagram Reels to TikTok, to WhatsApp statuses passed around like sacred text. "You threw me out like trash. Now you want to recycle me because I'm valuable." The one-liner was now a rallying cry. Women across Africa and beyond were quoting it, stitching the moment into videos, turning it into artwork. Memes appeared. Quotes were printed on shirts. Radio stations replayed the audio. One popular podcast called it the line that shook Lagos. Adanna, meanwhile, was quiet. She spent the day inside her hotel room, curled on a cushioned window seat overlooking the city skyline, camera by her side. Her phone buzzed endlessly, hundreds of calls, thousands of messages, interview requests from CNN Africa, BBC, Al Jazeera, and more. But her soul was still. Kalu sat nearby with a cup of cocoa, quietly observing her as he read the newspaper. "You know," he said gently, not looking up, "the world rarely rewards silence. But sometimes, silence is where your next sentence is born." She looked at him. He folded the paper. "You don't have to perform. Just speak when you're ready." Adanna nodded slowly. "I wasn't trying to be a symbol. I was just being honest. That's exactly why you became one." Later that evening, she finally opened her laptop and typed out a caption under one of her most powerful photos, a dark-skinned woman standing in front of a broken-down house, her back straight, her gaze unflinching. "This is Nina. She lost her home in a flood. But when I asked her why she still smiled, she said, 'Because my strength isn't tied to anything that can wash away.' For every woman who's been told she's only valuable when she's needed, remember, your value doesn't begin with someone else's recognition. I am Adanna Okari. I am her lens. And I see you. Asterisk." She clicked post. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. Thousands flooded in, praising her vulnerability, her eye for truth, her voice. Verified accounts reposted. Brands reached out. A luxury camera brand offered her a sponsorship deal. A publishing house proposed a photojournalism memoir. But more than anything, women shared their own stories beneath the post, stories of abandonment, survival, rediscovery. One comment read, "I left with only a nylon bag and my 3-month-old daughter. You gave me courage today. Thank you." Another, "Your pictures healed something I didn't know needed healing." Adanna sat back, stunned. The world was listening. And more importantly, it was seeing. The days following the exhibition were a whirlwind. She appeared on TV shows, dressed simply in white linen blouses and gold stud earrings, always with a camera slung across her chest. Interviewers were drawn to her humility. "So tell us," one host asked during a live segment, "who is her lens, really?" Adanna paused thoughtfully. "She's every woman who thought silence meant weakness, until she turned her pain into light." The audience clapped. Behind the cameras, Kalu gave a quiet nod of approval. She spoke in schools. She gave talks at women's shelters. She visited rural communities and shared both photography tips and her story. But Adanna refused to let the fame consume her. She returned to her roots constantly, often revisiting the village where everything started. It was during one of these visits that the idea came to her. She was sitting outside Kalu's home, barefoot, watching a group of teenage girls take selfies with cracked phones. They laughed freely, unbothered by the world. But Adanna saw something deeper, how they'd light up when shown how to hold a real camera, how they paused when asked about dreams. Later that evening, she said to Kalu, "I want to start something. A place where girls can learn to tell their own stories. Where they learn not just photography, but how to see themselves." He raised his brow. "What will you call it?" She smiled. "Next Door Dreams." The name stuck. Within weeks, donors and organizations reached out to support the foundation. An NGO offered to build a small creative center in the village. Volunteers signed up, writers, photographers, therapists. Even some celebrities donated. Her lens was no longer just a movement. It was a mission. Classes began on the first Saturday of the month. The small classroom was painted sky blue, filled with borrowed stools and recycled desks. On the wall hung a quote. "Sometimes, your destiny isn't far away. It's just next door." Adanna walked in that morning wearing jeans and a cotton top. 15 girls sat in front of her, wide-eyed, their notebooks ready. She held up her first camera, the same antique Kalu had handed her the night it all began. "I didn't grow up with a dream to be a photographer," she told them. "In fact, I thought my life ended when I got thrown out of a house I called home." The girls leaned forward. "But a stranger next door gave me this camera. And with it, I began to see the world differently. I saw pain and beauty living in the same face. I saw my own reflection in others. I saw that I wasn't alone." She paused. "Today, I'll teach you how to hold a camera. But more importantly, I'll teach you how to hold on to yourself. Because you are worth capturing. Your dreams are worth framing." One of the girls, Adeze, raised her hand shyly. "Miss Adanna, what do you do when someone tells you you're nothing?" Adanna walked to her, knelt gently. "You don't believe them. Not because you want to feel good, but because they don't hold your truth. You do." The classroom fell quiet. That evening, as golden sunlight spilled across the courtyard, Adanna stood at the center and watched the girls photograph each other. Laughing, posing, storytelling. She took a photo of them mid-laughter, then wrote beneath it, "This is what healing looks like, laughter returning to mouths that once only knew silence." One morning weeks later, a woman showed up at the classroom gate. She was tall, dressed in a peach wrapper, a baby strapped to her back. Her eyes were tired, lips trembling. "I saw your video," she said. "I walked 2 towns to get here. My husband locked me out. I have nothing. But I want to learn." Adanna reached for her hand. "You have a story," she said. "And that's everything." They entered together. That night, as rain began to fall gently over Azure House, Adanna sat on the porch with Kalu. She was barefoot, hair loose, camera in her lap. He sipped his tea, staring at the stars. "You know," he said, "I gave you that camera thinking you needed healing. I never imagined you'd become the healer." She smiled, heart full. "You didn't just give me a tool. You gave me purpose. And you gave others sight," he added. "Even those who didn't know they were blind." The wind stirred the trees. Thunder rumbled in the distance. But inside Adanna, there was peace. She looked at the world beyond the fence and knew she hadn't just found a new path, she had built one. And this time, the lens wasn't just focused outward. It was steady. It was intentional. It was hers. The week had started with sunshine. Adanna was in the city, preparing for her next exhibition, a traveling collection titled Faces of Resilience. The gallery team bustled around her, setting up mounted canvases and hanging quotes on the wall. Her photo of Adeze, now a confident young girl holding her own camera, took center stage. Beneath it read the quote, "She didn't wait for a prince, she chose her own mirror." Everything was in motion. Her story was being told through light and shadow. She had become what no one expected, a name, a brand, a movement. But she didn't know the past had been watching, waiting, planning an entrance. It began with a call she almost didn't answer. She had been flipping through a proof booklet when her phone buzzed. The screen flashed an unknown number. For a moment, she hesitated. Most unknown calls these days were reporters, fans, or critics. But something told her to answer. "Hello." Silence. Then a breath. "It's me." Her fingers stiffened. The booklet slid from her lap. "Adanna." The voice was unmistakable. Smooth. Calculated. "Boma." She said nothing. "I saw the video," he continued. "The gallery, the crowd. Wow." Adanna closed her eyes, leaned back against the wall. "What do you want?" There was a pause. "To talk. Just talk." "About what?" Her voice was cold. Firm. "I don't know. Maybe about us. What happened? What we lost." "We didn't lose anything," she said. "You threw it away." "Adanna, come on. We were married for 10 years. That counts for something. No, she replied. It should have. But it didn't, to you. I've changed. His voice lowered. Seeing what you've become, it made me realize things. Maybe we both made mistakes. She let the silence stretch long and sharp. Then she ended the call. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But she knew it wasn't the end. 2 days later, it happened. The second night of her exhibition was filled with laughter, media lights, and warm conversations. Gallery walls glowed. Guests moved in slow reverence between pieces. Adanna was dressed in emerald green, her locks tied back, her smile soft and composed. Kalu had arrived an hour earlier and stood proudly near the portrait of Adanna in the rain, taken unknowingly on her first night at Azure House. She looks like she's rising out of storm water, a guest said. She was, Kalu replied. Then the atmosphere shifted. Voices murmured. A camera flash burst, not at a photo, but at someone entering the hall. Boma. Dressed immaculately in a navy suit, his beard freshly trimmed, he walked in slowly, scanning the room. People whispered, instantly recognizing him from the viral clip. A few phones discreetly recorded. Adanna stood near a portrait of a blind mother holding her newborn son. She stiffened as she felt the weight of familiar energy. He approached cautiously, hands in his pockets. "Hi." She didn't reply. "I didn't want to make a scene," he said, voice lowered. "But I needed to see you." "You could have watched online," she replied without turning. "I wanted to say it in person," he said. "I was wrong. So wrong." She slowly faced him, her eyes calm but unreadable. "I didn't see what I had. I thought you were holding me back. But I was the one dragging you down." The gallery quieted. Guests stepped back discreetly. Some eavesdropped. Some recorded. "I know I can't erase what I did," Boma said. "But I want to try. A second chance. We can rebuild." Adanna looked at him fully now, her chin lifted. "You think because I've risen, I need you by my side? You think you get to reappear now and rewrite the ending?" "No," he said, voice trembling. "I want to be part of the next chapter." Her eyes flashed. "You don't get to edit a story you abandoned." Her voice rang clearly now. "You left me in the rain. You humiliated me. You broke something that used to call you home." The room was silent. Even the music had faded. She stepped forward. "I built this life without you. Every photo on this wall was captured with hands you once told were useless. Every woman I helped, every girl I taught, that was without your support, without your blessing." He swallowed. "I was lost, Adanna. So was I. But the difference is, I found myself. You didn't come back for love. You came back for the spotlight. For what I've become." Gasps echoed softly in the background. She took another step forward and said the words that would trend again. "You threw me out like trash. And now you want to recycle me because I'm valuable." The crowd gasped again. A click. A flash. Cameras caught the moment. Adanna, tall and radiant, eyes fierce. Boma's mouth opened. Closed. His pride fractured. "I'm sorry," he mumbled and turned away. The doors closed behind him. A second later, applause. Loud. Unashamed. Adanna stood still, her chest rising and falling. Then she turned and walked directly toward Kalu, who stood by the portrait of her younger self, wet, uncertain, but whole. He smiled as she reached him. "You didn't just rise," he said. "You soared." She laughed through tears. "I didn't even know I could fly." "You didn't need wings," Kalu replied. "You had vision." The next morning, social media exploded again. Hashtags flooded timelines. Hashtag Herland's hashtag RecycleMe not hashtag NextDoorStrength. One blog wrote, "Adanna Okari is not just a storyteller, she is a revolution in a camera strap." Another said, "The ex-husband's return was the perfect setup for the most graceful shutdown in modern history." Brands reached out with more vigor. One offered her a global campaign, portraits of women across Africa, their stories told through her lens. But she wasn't chasing fame. She returned to her girls at the Next Door Dream Center that weekend. She arrived in a simple t-shirt and sneakers, her hair braided into a bun. Adis ran to her. "Miss Adanna, we saw your video. That man tried to get you back." Adanna chuckled. "Yes, he did." "What did you tell him?" another girl asked. Adanna smiled. "I told him something important." They all leaned forward. She crouched beside them. "Never let someone who couldn't handle your seed come looking when you bloom." The girls erupted in giggles. Later that day, they sat under a mango tree, sketching ideas for a new photo series, The Girls Who Glowed. Adanna lifted her camera. She focused on Adis, catching her mid-laugh, hair wild, eyes bright. Click. Behind that lens, she felt it again, the sacred pause where healing happened. The past had returned, yes. But she didn't need to shut the door again. She had already walked so far past it that it no longer defined her. She wasn't reclaiming her power. She was the power. And now, her focus was clear. The sun was barely up when Adanna stepped out into the quiet courtyard of Azure House. The air was soft and still, the kind that wrapped around your skin like silk. She inhaled deeply. The scent of dew-kissed hibiscus floated through the air, mingling with the comforting aroma of the papaya tree that shaded the back fence. She stood for a moment with her camera dangling from her neck, barefoot on the cool tiles. Around her, life was beginning to stir. Roosters crowed in the distance, a child laughed down the lane, and a kettle whistled gently from Kalu's kitchen window. But today was different. It was her last morning in this house. The same house where she had arrived drenched and discarded. The same place where she had been given nothing more than a blanket and a camera, and, somehow, found herself again. Inside, Kalu was already awake, dressed in a faded Ankara robe, stirring a pot of tea. When she entered, he looked up with that familiar twinkle in his eye. "Didn't sleep, did you?" She smiled. "A little." He poured 2 cups without asking. "Big day." She nodded, wrapping her hands around the mug. "It still doesn't feel real." "Destiny rarely announces itself with drums," he said. "It comes quietly. And then everything changes." Adanna sat across from him, eyes resting on the old wooden camera on the shelf. She'd kept it there as a tribute, even after she began using her new gear. It was the first gift she received when she had nothing. It was more than metal and glass. It was a key. "I'm moving," she said softly, as if reminding herself. "To the city," Kalu replied with a gentle nod. "But not away from us. You'll carry us wherever you go." Adanna smiled. "I already do." He sipped his tea. "You're not just leaving as her lens. You're leaving as a legacy." By midday, she stood in front of the newly constructed Next Door Dreams Creative Hub, a sleek, sunlit building painted in soft earth tones and decorated with vibrant murals by local artists. It was built on land the village had donated, now filled with classrooms, photography labs, an editing suite, and a healing garden. On the side wall, a mural stood 10 feet tall, a dark-skinned girl holding a camera to her eye, her other eye glistening with a tear of hope. Below it were painted the words, "You are never too broken to tell your story." Adanna Okari, founder. Today, Adanna was officially handing over leadership to a capable young woman named Zuri, a former student, now a skilled photographer and mentor in her own right. "You're ready," Adanna told her. "You see people. That's what matters." Zuri smiled, her voice catching. "I just hope I can make you proud." "You already have," Adanna said, embracing her. "Just make them proud of themselves. That's what this place is about." The girls lined up to say their goodbyes. Adis clung to her hand longest. "You're coming back, right?" "Always," Adanna said, kneeling beside her. "Besides, you owe me a photo. Remember what we said?" Adis grinned. "We don't just take pictures. We take people home." Adanna's eyes shimmered. "Exactly." By evening, she arrived at her new apartment in the city. It was modest, a 2-bedroom flat on the 3rd floor of a quiet building overlooking a small garden. She liked it that way. Fame hadn't changed her soul. She still preferred quiet over noise, truth over trends. As she unpacked, she placed 2 frames on the windowsill. One held the photo of her standing in the rain that night Boma threw her out. She wasn't smiling in it, but her eyes were alive. Brave. Raw. The second frame held a recent picture, taken just days ago at the final exhibition of Faces of Resilience. In it, she stood with her students, arms linked, laughing as if they'd known each other forever. 2 frames. 2 lives. 1 journey. A week later, she stood at the headquarters of Lens for Change, the global women-led creative organization that had just named her their new ambassador. The press conference was simple. Adanna wore a soft blue jumpsuit and stood behind the podium without notes. "Years ago, I stood on a doorstep with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I had no money, no plan, no voice. But the man next door didn't see what I lacked. He saw what I carried." She paused. The room was silent. "And now, I carry others. Through stories. Through light. Through this lens." She held up the old wooden camera for all to see. "This is what gave me back my life. And now, I give it to others." Reporters clapped. Cameras flashed. But one moment lingered most. At the back of the room, a teenage girl stood silently, cradling a sketchbook to her chest. When the press cleared, she approached Adanna. I saw your video. The one where you told him off. And then the one where you cried and smiled at once. That one stayed with me." Adanna looked at her kindly. "What's your name?" "Chisholm," the girl whispered. "I want to be like you. Not famous, just free." Adanna reached out, touching her hand. "You don't need to be like me," she said gently. "You just need to tell your truth. That's where your freedom starts." That night, Adanna sat on her balcony overlooking the city, camera in hand, journal in her lap. She didn't post as often these days. But when she did, it was intentional. She uploaded a new photo to her Lens. It was a close-up of her hand resting gently on the old camera. On her wrist was a tattoo she'd gotten the day she opened Next Door Dreams, a tiny open door with light spilling through. The caption read, "Sometimes, your destiny isn't locked in the house you're trying to save. Sometimes, it's next door, holding a camera, waiting to show you the frame that changes everything. I am Adanna. I was broken. I was thrown out. But I did not fall. I focused. I healed. And now I frame futures." Asterisk. Comments poured in, testimonies, gratitude, declarations of personal breakthroughs. But she didn't wait around to read them all. Instead, she closed the app, walked over to the shelf, and lifted a new, sealed camera box, one she intended to donate to the newest member of the Dreamers program. She smiled. Her journey wasn't an ending. It was a lens. And through it, hundreds of women, and counting, were finally seeing themselves. Not through someone else's eyes, but through their own. The end. Loved the story? Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and become part of the Morales Stories family. Your support helps us bring more powerful African tales to life. Thanks for watching. We can't wait to share the next one with you. See you soon.